Yes, this is part B, what I see of today. So I'm saying hath, meaning that the Lord is to walk with you in continuation, in relation to calling. Yes, when God calls you, is willing to walk with you through everything. And each and every one of us here were we called by God, and each and every one of us here were we called by God. However, I want to set a thin line difference, and that there's a difference between being called and chosen. There's a difference between being called and be chosen. And chosen. What does it mean to be called and what does it mean to be chosen? These are two different things totally. Let's go back in looking at the original languages the texts were written in. One, Hebrew and Aramaic for the Old Testament. Two, Greek for the New Testament, as well as Latin, which shaped church tradition for centuries. Both concepts carry deep meaning, moving from legal selection to intimate ownership. Legal selection, using of the word due to the freedom of you to use it. Intimate ownership, the usal of the word as per encountered. Thus, therefore, as per encountered is what we are looking for. Encountered, how God decided to come, per according in his heart. Thus, therefore, in this case, how God encountered the sorts of people like Jeremiah the prophet, Paul the apostle, Amos the prophet. The ones chosen, Apostle Paul, Jeremiah the prophet. Once called an example, Amos the prophet, being called, being reached out in a certain location, reached out by the person individually. Scripture reference, Amos chapter 7 and from verse 14 to 15. Then Amos answered and said to Amaziah, I was no prophet. Okay, then Amos answered and said to Amaziah, this is Amos chapter 7 and from verse 14 to 15. Then Amos answered and said to Amaziah, I was no prophet, nor a prophet's son, but I was a herdsman and a dresser of sycamore figs. Full stop. But the Lord took me from following the flock, and the Lord said to me, go, prophesy to my people Israel. Full stop. English Standard Version, ESV. The Lord took Amos the prophet from being a herdsman and a dresser of sycamore figs. Therein we see God reaching out to Amos the prophet. A called person is a reached person by someone, like in this case. Okay, a called person is a reached person by someone. Like in this case, is God who reached out. A reached out person is one in sincerityness who deserved not, but was handed over, like in this case, God is the one who handed it over to Amos, who later then became his prophet. Amos in previous lineage we see was not in the prophetic, but just a herdsman and one too known as a dresser of sycamore figs. Chosen, predestinated, before, destinated, coming to this world. That's in full, before coming in this world. Paul the apostle tells us that the Lord had it on in mind in that before he coming to the world, that was meant for him to be to serve God, being an apostle, just as the same with Jeremiah the prophet, before he was even in his mother's womb, like it was the idea of God, of why Jeremiah to serve him. He was already set apart. The favor of the Lord was already upon him in relation of he to have the calling. God carefully and lovingly chose him. The Hebrew language or term of the word chosen is bashar. Literal meaning and biblical context: to select, examine or take delight in. The literal meaning and biblical context is to select, examine or take delight in. Or take delight in. In simple terms, God selected Paul, Jeremiah, Jesus Christ, even, and not only selected but to even, after examination, God took delight in the above three to walk in those ideal selections of God. Chosen people are treasured people before God's eyes. Treasured people as in worthy before God's eyes to walk in those ideal selections. Treasured people as in worthy before of God's eyes to walk in those ideal selections. Like out of a group, either large or small. These are precious people out of those group of people. Treasured things comes automatic. Immediately you see them, you treasure it. A balance I want to bring. I'm not saying called people aren't before God's sight. Choosing people meant to be. Automatically, how they are and what they face were meant to be. E.g., ladies and gentlemen, women and men. Men were meant to deposit sperms to the women. That's what we call choosing, while women to reproduce. I hope you have the understanding. Walk not today in a crooked path that